The question today, is the hobby dying? On this show, we have Stephen Atwell, Ralph Renzetti, myself, Steve Brown, and of course, our host, Andy Crawford. And that's coming at you right now.
The last time when we were discussing when the hobby was dying, we had some really interesting discussion that we'd like to pick back up on with the cost of the hobby. And I think that's a real relevant point as well. What's your guys' thoughts on where that's headed and what the impact is?
Well, should I fire the first shot? Because I think the last time I was the one that was going off about the price of this stuff, right?
Sure.
And here's the thing. I know you get what you pay for, okay? But I think it was on eBay or something. I saw a Gevo Tier 2 with sound in scale for like 490 something bucks. 400 something bucks. That's my truck payment.
Who's the manufacturer?
Cato. I believe it's Cato.
Oh.
Or no, Scale Trains. Oh, crap. I can't remember. I don't know. I'm not a cool model railroader like all you guys are. I just buy crap that looks good. But last time what I was getting at is it can be expensive. It can be cost prohibitive in some cases. And so if you're going to look at the demographic of people getting into the hobby, one of two things has to happen. One, we have to consider the fact that some of this stuff's not cheap, people. And so when my 21-year-old son has got to feed his wife and kid on the ridiculously low salary I pay him to work for me, by the way, he gets to do that and maybe have a car and then build a model railroad too. I don't see it happen. And, you know, some of this cool stuff we're talking about is like software. Like I'm going to use Train Controller to run some of the stuff on my new layout. Well, that means automated turnouts. Turnouts alone are $20 in Scale, Pico turnout. And the motors are like 20 or 60. I think actually I can get them from Mr. Atwell for $16.99 for by the way, I didn't mean to plug your deal, but what the hell, it's true. So I guess, and then I'm going to try to pipe down here, but when I hear the hobby is dying, and then I look at how much this stuff costs, and people are using the age demographic as an indicator that the hobby's dying, I can't buy into it. I don't believe it's true. When I go to Vaughn's, I hear music from the 1980s being played, my stuff. The Clash that would not be played on the radio in 1980 or played in that store in 1980 is because I'm the age demographic that's got the money, and that's what they're catering to. If only they knew how little money I have. But so anyway, my summary thought is if you're going to look at the age demographic by itself, young people aren't getting into the hobby, it's dying. Consider that maybe they can't, because one of the barriers is it costs too much freaking money sometimes. Although there are inexpensive alternatives to getting in. DC locomotives are much cheaper, things of that nature. So that's
Ralph,
my take on it anyway.
Ralph, you looked like you were ready to go.
I was, and now I lost my train of thought. Oh well.
Train of thought, though, I think that's a good one. Train of thought.
If they really wanted to get into the hobby, it seems like the youth is totally online with whatever media they do. It's unbelievable the amount of railroad paraphernalia you can buy from eBay for the beginner, and it's a relatively cheap cost compared to the new costs that you get in manufacturing. Like you're saying, $50 for a car. I looked at a Rapido, what was it, a caboose that they brought out at one point. I refused to pay $95 for a caboose, and I'm in HO. And it's all because they say, well, we're putting more detail into it, and it's better quality. Well, it may be so, but if you keep going up in price, you may not be in business for very long, because a lot of the people don't want to pay that. But then you have the other demographic that just throws the money at it.
Yeah, that's an interesting one for us. There's a lot of people that complain about the cost of the hobby, and I'm not trying to lump Ralph into this. There's a lot of people that are saying, well, prices keep going up and they keep adding all these more details and everything gets higher and higher and higher. And we hear it all the time. It's too expensive. It's too expensive. But then for us, we try to stock everything. So we stock the AccuRail, which is AccuRail's sort of the current day Athearn Blue Box.
Yeah.
And we stock the DCC sound equipped locomotives from Intermountain and the likes.
Scale.
And people scream, "Oh, that's so expensive." And then 2 weeks after it's come out, we're out of stock of the really expensive ones, and all of the moderately priced ones are sitting on the shelf still.
Still sitting there. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
With the
people
impact from sticker shock. So people are complaining.
complain about it, but then they still go buy their BMW. So it's interesting. There's a lot of, they like to complain about it, but then they still fork over the money. And I can't blame the manufacturers for continuing to produce this stuff when us, like we as a hobby shop, our numbers for low priced items, we continue to get fewer and fewer each time we reorder because they sit on the shelf longer and longer. And so we used to get, say, 10 of the low priced item and 5 of the high priced item. And now those numbers have reversed, and these manufacturers are responding to hobby shops and individuals, but mostly the hobby shop orders who are placing orders for the higher expense, the more expensive thing, the higher detailed thing, whatever the case may be, because people complain about it. But then when they come into the store and hold the $60 version and hold the $300 version, they say, "Well, this one looks like crap." And then they buy the 300. Right. But you can have five of these that don't really look like crap. Like if you set them next to each other and you're looking at them from 6 inches away, yeah, there's a huge difference. But the 3-foot rule applies here. Like if I'm standing 3 feet from my layout and I'm looking at and the train is moving, I can't see every little detail that goes by. And Steve and I Steve's in InScale, I'm in InScale. Like I personally, I'll never personally probably own a $400 InScale locomotive because I like my InScale locomotives moving. I like the InScale locomotives on the layout to represent a thing, not a museum piece. I'm not looking for a museum piece running around my layout.
Copy that. And you know, I just while you're talking about that, I personally am not actually complaining about the cost of stuff in the hobby because you get what you pay for. Some of those locomotives that come with InScale locomotives that come with sound and everything else that are so expensive are totally awesome. And I'd be willing to pay $250 for it or $300 for it. So from that perspective, I don't necessarily care how much stuff costs in the hobby. I'm going to get what I'm going to get because I love doing it, but I have that income. But I just think some of the, and I'm not disagreeing with you at all, Steve, but I think if people are going to look at the young people component not coming in, well, we're not getting enough 16-year-olds in the hobby, it's dying. It doesn't mean it is. It means maybe a 16-year-old hasn't been introduced to the fact that it's still cool to buy a $59 DC locomotive and have a DC layout because, frankly, what you're saying, Steve, is true. The trains are moving on the track, right? The cool part about the hobby is not necessarily the locomotive, it's it moving and then all the scenery and all the other junk, and scenery stuff doesn't cost a whole lot of money. And frankly, it's my favorite part.
Yeah.
So
there are so many things to do in this hobby. I mean, the hobby is a group of so many individual hobbies because we're diorama builders, we're model kit builders, we're building structures. There's so many different things to do that you can kind of move in and out, and some things are cheaper than others. I have this layout behind me, and I haven't really touched it in a year. And all I've wanted to do for the last, when I start working on stuff, is I've built structures. I've really debated just building a couple scenery modules that are 1 foot by 1 foot because I can build something specific. I want to build this wooded thing that maybe doesn't belong with this layout. I can build a 1 foot by 1 foot thing, set it on a shelf, and then, later I can be like, oh, I want to build kind of a rock quarry type wall. Maybe I can, and there's so many different ways to participate in the hobby that are not expensive, and you can get a lot of things, or there's just so many ways to participate in the hobby that are not expensive.
Copy that.
See,
maybe people need to know that, though. Maybe that's part of it, because what I see when I'm looking through a model railroader magazine is a bunch of expensive stuff. crap
Well, that's the thing.
and high tech stuff. And I'm not saying again, I'm on your side on this one. Howard.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
I'm not arguing, but when that's all you're exposed to, it has to be DCC. It has to be sound equipped. You have to have 20 locomotives. And by the way, sidebar real quick. Does every layout have to be 2 decks and take up a 30-foot by 40-foot space?
Yeah,
Because that's all I see. So if that's what I'm going to see in the magazines, then I'm looking at it as a young kid going, man, I guess it's not cool to have a shelf layout that's 12 inches deep and 8 foot long and in scale. I guess you can't do that because, don't get me started. I'm sorry. I know I'm getting off topic, but that kind of stuff really.
it's not. I don't think it's off topic. I mean,
I think it's a barrier to younger people getting into the hobby.
there's all these people that, and it's not even younger people. I see it with middle-aged people that contact us and say, I want to get into model railroading. I was like, okay, you want to get into model railroading? What are your thoughts? Well, I have a 20 by 40 basement and I want to go around the entire room. I'm going to suggest you don't do that. Like,
Get started on something small.
Start like this and then do that. Yeah,
well, there's an article, and I don't know.
I did.
And I followed it for a while because it was really great, and it talked about the chainsaw layout. And the idea was that you start with like a small layout, like an HO scale, like a 4x8, or an in scale, like a 2x3, something small. You build the small layout. You build it for low cost. You try out all the different areas of the hobby. And when you feel like you've gotten everything out of that layout that you can get out of that layout, you remove your rolling stock from it. You remove the buildings you want to keep from it. And you grab a chainsaw and you chop it into little pieces and start over.
Copy that.
And
I love
you've learned about yourself. You've learned if you like the hobby without getting super invested into the hobby.
And you know where you made your mistakes.
You know where
them.
you've learned along the way. And now you can cater your next layout and your following layout to the things you like best. I don't think there's probably a person in this room right now that has only built one layout in their life.
Nope, not me.
I'm on my 4th or 5th layout. And this is my most modern layout. It's 18 inches deep by 14 feet long.
Boom.
Yeah. I've been in the hobby for 2 decades. Here's this layout. It's 14 feet long, 18 inches deep. That's all I have. I enjoy this layout. Like, I really like track work. There's a lot of fun track work on it. I like railroad operations. Like, it's a little better than plywood only because I put cork over the entire thing. Like, it's so it's cost may be a barrier, but part of that barrier is a mental barrier because we think, well, if I can't be like this or I can't be like that, maybe I shouldn't do it at all.
Right. I'm going to back the bus up just a little bit.
Just don't back it up over me, Ralph.
Okay. I'm going to aim this one at you because you and I talked about this once before.
Uh-oh. Me or Atwell?
Brown.
Oh, crap. Go ahead.
When you build a locomotive or a train, my specialty is weathering.
Mm-hmm.
So I weather the locomotive and I weather whatever cars are on the end. In between, when that train's traveling around, people don't see it.
Right.
They see the beginning, they see the end. So in the middle, you can now go to your cheaper cars, your blue boxes, your AccuRail, and so on, and have the finely detailed stuff at the beginning and the end. So you don't have to have everything expensive.
Copy
But
that.
don't Newgate has pushed that concept of the chainsaw layout. I love that. You need to learn some. You need to build a few layouts. I don't care what a person did getting into the hobby. The first layout is going to be somewhat disposable just because their expectations will change. And I think there's always been that price spectrum in the hobby of the most expensive stuff. Part of the reason I come back to the hobby a number of years ago was because the higher availability was there without having to go to brass and deal with all those consequences. I couldn't meet the quality that I wanted to get from the stuff that was available a number of years ago. And I think that's the area that I'm most excited about. And the reason that the last show about this topic we were talking about, I'm quite optimistic about the future of the hobby, but it's about those, to me, it's those late 20s, 30s, early 40s, disposable income stable gentlemen who are getting back into a hobby again. That's where I think the growth opportunity can come from. Yes, it'll come from the youth in the hobby. It'll come from a wide range of people in the hobby with a lot of different expectations. But the area where I'm seeing the most exciting growth is the people who are doing the RPM shows. that are fascinated by weathering, that are fascinated by the rolling stock and equipment that's coming out that has road specific and road number specific details. Yeah, that price is higher, but boy, there's a tremendous, massive amount of enthusiasm in that group of individuals. And then Joe Fugit's Toma stuff, the idea that you could start by building a 2x4 module, get your feet wet, then build another one of those modules and another one of those modules, and you can extend and grow a layout. That makes it much more easy to, it's much easier to eat that elephant one bite at a time,
Sure.
economically and from an education and knowledge and skill perspective.
Sure. I agree with that completely. But on that note, one of the things that then I think needs to get presented more publicly or more out in the open is that exact concept is when I'm getting emails and comments, Steve, I want to get in the hobby. What should I do? Steve, I get in the hobby. It was too expensive. What I'm trying to do is steer them into, look, my first layout was it was a little smaller than actually Mr. Atwell's down there, but same thing. It was 12 inches deep and it was 7 feet by 11 feet in a bedroom. That was it. And I built a whole in-scale empire on that thing. And then I got greedy and I expanded. But rather than this, and this is just what I'm seeing, okay? It may not be all of y'all, but what I'm seeing, rather than this mentality of you've got to go full DCC with sound, all modern diesel stuff with all this expensive stuff, which is cool. And I dig it. I've got some of it. Some kind of way, somebody needs to let more people know that that's like, if you're into racing, you can race a Formula One or race a go-kart to get started. But everybody looks at the Formula Ones. Nobody's paying attention to the go-kart.
But there is inexpensive ways to get in there.
I agree with you. But nobody, well, not nobody, we're talking about it. But you don't see that in the mainstream, that there are really entry-level ways to get in. So
that's what I think too.
That, and maybe in the next time we talk about this, we could talk about some of the attitude of some of the old timers when younger folks want to get in and they start talking about, hey, I've got a DCC Tyco, I don't know, Camelback that I want to run. What are you doing with that piece of crap? Yeah, don't talk, we'll talk about that later. Another barrier.
That's what I think's lacking. And that's why I say, and especially the last time we're talking about this, I'm extremely optimistic for a host of reasons. But I do think that we're missing that the outlets are missing an opportunity to attract other people that are currently outside of the hobby, to bring new people into the hobby, regardless of their age demographic. I think we're missing opportunities to excite them about the social benefits of our hobby, the operations and gameplay benefits, the electronic interactions, controller trades with folks. There's so many things that the youth would get extremely enthusiastic about, but nobody is going after it. And if they don't, then is the hobby dying is going to be a much harder conversation to have in a decade if we don't attract and approach in the future. Now, the next time we come back to this, let's regroup on this conversation.
I don't think it's
sure.
I don't think maybe it's. You're saying that the groups aren't reaching out to the younger group, and you're talking about the old standards not reaching out to the younger groups. Which, yes, you are correct. NMRA is not reaching out to a younger crowd. They don't know how. They're not interested in learning how. They say they're interested in learning how, but then I personally have gotten involved or tried to get involved. And anytime that I mention, hey, the current state of this is kind of weird. And as soon as they realize that, like, oh, this guy kind of wants to change things,
they don't want to talk to you.
No longer welcome. So the old guard, and I'm not referring to age specific, I'm referring to companies and organizations and whatnot. I believe absolutely fit into that description that you just made. They're not reaching out to a younger group, and I don't think they know how. And I don't think they're willing to try to learn. But you look at YouTube, you look at Steve Brown's channel, where it is very easy to sit down and being like, there was a time that soon after I met Steve and we were talking about his channel, and I said, I don't know, you're kind of like my drunk uncle at Thanksgiving. Like,
I didn't know how to take that, but I think it's a compliment.
Yeah, like it's easy to sit there and watch him and you don't feel like you're being talked down to, and you realize that even people that are showing you also make mistakes, and like, it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. You can fix it later. Like, YouTube's a great. There's a lot of channels on YouTube that you can look at and be like, oh, you know what? I can do that. Or people can make mistakes and you can do these small things. It's, again, our media is changing and we can consume differently. I don't have a lot of analytics left on our channel. We haven't produced a lot of YouTube stuff recently. But I'm sure the demographics are probably still similar, where, yes, the largest age group is older. The oldest age group has the most disposable income generally,
Sure.
and the most time to do these things. But we also saw a substantial number, and we see it in our shop because we get demographics on purchase patterns for our shop and who's looking at our ads and who's moving through our ads. There is a substantial number of 20, 30, and 40-year-olds in the hobby that are making their way to these YouTube videos, and they're making their way to our shop to get their things. They're just not doing it via what is considered traditional model railroading methods.
Exactly.
And I think there's a
Well, there you
tremendous
go.
amount of opportunity to reach out to people. The next time we come back to this topic on our next video, I think we should definitely start with that conversation. So,
Sure.
and look for the next time this video for this topic is addressed for the return of that conversation. Thanks everybody for watching this video.
Hi, this is Big Bill coming to you from YouTube Model Builders. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion tonight that we presented to you. Please tune in next Friday after 3 p.m. when we will post another discussion on model railroad views. Thank you for watching. Take care. God bless, and we'll see you on the radio.